I had a question in one of my recent videos about the idea of anger, and anger is a really interesting issue, and quite a few people have brought it up to me in the past because probably mentioned it here and there. So I'm going to kind of lay down I think the four main reasons why I think that we get angry, and generally speaking, the trend that you're going to see between these reasons is that they're all obviously linked as an emotional response to something, and linked to our values, linked to investment, and so on and so forth. So, and I'm not an expert. I haven't really looked at, haven't studied this or anything. I can only speak from my personal experience. But, um, as you would analyze anything, I'm going to try to like break down anger. What anger is into the biggest parts that I can currently think of, and we can go from there. And we can see what can actually help us in performance when it comes to achieving your goals in Counter Strike or whatever it might be, where you're experiencing anger, and trying to understand how to manage your anger to better your ability to improve and increase performance. So the first one I think is going to be expectation, and this is something that I talk about all the time. If you have any expectation, if you're investing in an expectation emotionally, when that expectation is not met, if it's denied, you're gonna probably feel angry or some level of emotional response. That's just how it works. If you have invested in something, that is how it works. And this is the interesting thing, because I was talking about in our last video about identity and hunger, and these are things that are actually linked into this a little bit, because you're in a situation where if you're really really hungry, you're very very invested in this idea that you're going to do something, like you're going to become the best player. You're very invested in that drive. So when things come in your way, when you hit obstacles, it's very frustrating because you're not able to meet the expectation of the progress that you may even have subconsciously set in your mind. Obviously, we aim always to, or at least we should aim always to take it day by day with a big scope in mind. To help us better deal with situations like limitation of expectation, because expectation, I mean, generally speaking, it's kind of a faulty way the human mind works in many ways, because we can only see so far into the future, and it's quite an interesting topic insofar as I think they have actually done in the past studies regarding success with children. I think the idea was if there are some children that are better able, or infants that are better able to grasp deep gratification versus other children that fail the deep gratification and go for the instant gratification instead. But I think the test was something like this, whereby you had a scientist dude or whatever, like guy carrying out the test, and he would say to the kid, all right, if you wait 20 minutes or something, like, I can't remember exactly what the time was, but if you wait 20 minutes, I'm going to give you two sweets, but if you don't want to wait, I can give you one now. Right, and this was the idea of are you willing to go through some work to reach this goal, which is greater and more satisfying. Deep gratification obviously involves a lot of time, hurt, and pain to get to the goal, which is going to satisfy you. Or would you rather have the result right now, straight away, without doing anything? Would you rather have that? And so they looked at this as an indicator, towards the success of those children. And it's one of those like really long term studies. I think is it called longitudinal studies, something like that. I think that's something like what I remember from years ago. Either way, that's an interesting idea, right? So generally speaking, this is very difficult for a lot of us to actually be able to see far into the future. So it's having that perspective, framing things in that way, can sometimes be quite difficult, and it can happen to the best of us that you even lose track of that, even if you're fully aware of it, and you get angry because you're not able to meet the grand goal in your journey for deep gratification, which is that goal of achieving something within this game that's highly competitive and highly skilled, or the requirements are highly skilled, highly skillful. So the other reason I would say is, and by the way, I think that first point is one of the biggest ones, and we'll talk about managing that at the end of this little segment. So the second one is, if your identity has been attacked, if your character has been is being assaulted. Now this is another, to some extent, it's another idea about investment. I think this trend runs through everything, whereby you've invested in your character, just again like with the identity thing, right? You have the situation where you've invested in who you are as a human being, and that's what you understand in the world. That's how your brain interprets yourself within the world, within your body, your purpose, your meaning, and who you are, how you react to things, all these kinds of things about your character. And as soon as somebody attacks your character in any way, either verbally or otherwise, It doesn't even have to be verbally. It could just be a situation where you suddenly feel like, let's say, you're in a situation where you felt like you're in like a sketchy situation and you couldn't defend somebody, right? And your masculinity in that sense was kind of assaulted, because we all have this intrinsic idea of masculinity that we could be the man in the situation. These are expectations set by society, but also I think legitimately there is obviously, if you're in a situation where a physical confrontation is going to happen and you're the only man present, then from just a physical aspect, you should in theory be the most equipped to deal with that situation. So that could be a spot where suddenly one of your innate kind of understandings of your character, or way that you comprehend your character, has been attacked, because masculinity is a really big part of every male's character. And how those roles play out. So that's going to make you angry. It's obviously going to, it's going to be a lot of other emotional responses in that example, but anger will definitely be one of them, I think. Angry, you'd be angry at yourself, right? That you failed. Anyway, I can move on from that. So, again, like the last video, it sounds like I'm just talking from personal experiences. That's actually not one of them, not yet anyway. Well, hopefully not ever. Either way. So the next one is, when you can't understand something. And I think this is a really big one too, when it comes to, gaming. And this was a really, really huge one for me, because I was so incredibly hungry when I was younger, but I was also a very stupid player. And you might not believe it now, because I focused so much on, thinking analytically and so on. But I was a very dumb player, very focused on mechanics only. And so I would have these situations where I was trying so fucking hard. I was pouring my every ounce of my soul into trying to achieve this result that I desperately wanted. And I would just keep hitting these stumbling blocks over and over again. And they would just keep happening. I just keep seeing them happening, and I just didn't understand why and how to approach this. And it made me angry, because I couldn't understand how to deal with it, and it was in the way of what I really, really wanted. So you can understand why that can be very frustrating, and I think for a lot of people that's going to resonate a little bit. And this is why analysis and stuff is important, and actually one of the reasons why I started the channel is because this is one of the best. It can be one of the better coping mechanisms, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So the fourth one is when shit happens that you can't control. Obviously, this one is not necessarily as applicable, I guess, to our situation, because. But generally speaking, stuff can always happen out of your control, and you can get really angry. To be honest, this can be, your teammates in the game, right? Because this kind of ties into some of the other ones, usually into expectation. Because you're going to have expectations on your teammates and what they're able to do. Because if you're playing a team game, your expectation is with your team, right? That they do their job, and if they don't do their job, they put you in a fucked up situation. Then all of a sudden you're like, fuck. I mean, you've put me in a bad spot now. Fuck, why have you done that? Like, now I have to, now I can't do what I'm supposed to do. Now I can't have that sick game that I was thinking I was going to have where everything went perfectly, all this kind of stuff. So, that can make you angry as well, because it's just not in your control. And it's much like the point just prior to it, because it's not in your control. You can't do anything about it. If you don't understand something, you can't do anything about it, right? That's helplessness in many ways, and that can make you very angry. All due to the fact that, again, I think it all ties into the fact that it's preventing you from achieving the result that you want. And so it's always going to be a bit about expectations. Always going to be a bit about what your goals are. And generally speaking, again, I do want to actually come back to that hunger idea a lot, because hunger is really the drive to. Is the main driving factor if you're a competitive player. It's like the main focus. It basically is that goal of being the best player, right? And you have to have that so intensely that you try to adapt to all situations. And this is one of the reasons why in the social intelligence video, I talked about how important it was that you have to be able to navigate your environment, because you're going to find yourself in lots of shitty spots. And I actually heard about one earlier today, and that's it's a really interesting discussion point. So I might have to make another video specifically about that, so I don't go too off the trail on this one. But there you have the four main reasons I think that why you can really get pissed off. And one of the interesting things, by the way, is again, I want to reiterate it a little bit, is that idea of the Benjamin Franklin effect, because I think that is very much this is going to lead in nicely now to how do we solve some of these issues. And this is kind of a funny, I always just think it's a bit funny how it works, because it shows in some ways, if you kind of drop your ego, there's lots of ways you can kind of hack how your brain works. And I have some friends who are very into, or I have a friend who's very into that sort of thing, and very into kind of being like biohackers as well, fucking around with your own chemistry as well to like get different effects, and trying to really understand how the body works to get the most out of it, or psychologically how to get the most out of your environment and yourself. Either way, so yeah, the Benjamin Franklin effect. So this is interesting because what it is it's a spot where Benjamin Franklin, much like how I said you have shitty teammates, he had a situation where, and sorry for those who were present when I already explained this, and so he had like a guy who was above him who's essentially blocking his path to success in many senses. That's the easiest way to put it, like a boss or whatever. They hated each other. And what he realized after a while is that he started to do favors for this guy. And this is now really interesting, right? Because your brain is always in a situation where it wants to try to rationalize everything. It needs to try to understand the universe. It needs to find a way to understand things. Otherwise, you get cognitive dissonance and shit's fucked up. Or that that is one of the things that can happen, that you can have cognitive dissonance. And equally, this is one of the reasons why that gets you so pissed off when you cannot understand something, because you have this idea in your mind of what you want to be, what you want to achieve, what you want to become, yet you're in this situation where you're not achieving that, and your brain's like, what the fuck is going on? This does not make sense. I'm doing everything I can that I know to do, and it's still not happening, but you got this drive in you that's still trying to force the issue, so it's really it can tear you up a little bit inside, right? So he was in a situation where he started doing favors for him, and then his brain had to rationalize it, because it's ridiculous, right? That if you do favors for somebody, that they're your enemy. How does that make any sense? In many ways, if you're perhaps a bit of a sociopath, it can very much make sense if it's like a pure manipulation thing. But this is more or less you manipulating your own brain, because your brain has to rationalize the situation. That guy can't be your enemy, and you're doing like really good stuff for him in most cases, because that's just again, there's the cognitive dissonance there. And much like the opposite is true insofar as if you do bad things to somebody, or if you've done bad things to somebody, your brain is much more inclined to dehumanize them, and to kind of make them the enemy in your mind a little bit, to rationalize the situation, so that your core values of which we talked about previously, your identity, your character, that is, I'm a good person, that all fits together, and that world living in your reality makes sense. So that's a very interesting idea, because what it's essentially saying is, if you are able to drop your ego in many situations to reframe certain things, you actually have the power to change how you think about stuff, and to change your responses to certain things. And again, in the end, that with that story, Benjamin Franklin, I believe, ended up becoming kind of like long-term friends with this guy, and there was no obstacle anymore, because it was a social obstacle, which is again why it's part of the social intelligence video, which is a very important topic. Either way, another way to try to manage expectation, because this is the biggest one, right? You want to try to be able to manage expectation. So one of the ways you want to be able to do it is to shift where you invest yourself emotionally. That's a very important factor, because if you're investing yourself in the outcome, then the outcome is random, right? The outcome is going to be random. Day for day, results will be random. Again, this is one of the reasons why poker was very helpful for me, because in poker it was a very, very good illustration, because the way of this concept, because the way that poker works, if you're going to be a professional player, is that you have to. It's a random game. Obviously, it's a game of chance, and you have to create a strategy, and you have to execute the strategy over the sample size of not 10,000 hands, not 20,000 hands, but probably 75 to 100,000 hands, which is a lot of hands, right? If you're online, it's very achievable to do that, within not much of a short time. But if you're playing live poker, I have no idea how live poker players manage things like that. I guess there's more elements more elements that there aren't involved in online play that you can use for success there. But anyway, I digress. So the idea there is that any results that you have now, you have to understand that those results aren't necessarily meaningful, right? They're not really meaningful. If you had a great game, that's actually not even very meaningful. And this is kind of the downside of this, is that if you have really good games, it's gonna feel good when you have really good games, and it's gonna feel bad when you have really bad games, because again, you're attached to the outcome. So in trying to detach yourself a little bit from the outcome initially and trying to focus on the longer game, then you're going to remove generally your emotional outcomes there. So you won't get as much instant gratification from doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? Because that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be playing well. And if you're in situations where you're not playing well, you won't get as much of a bad response because you're thinking to yourself, well, that's if so long as I'm learning something, as long as I'm making the right call, as long as I have a system in place to quantify my own improvement and quantify my own learning process, then that is where I take the good emotions, is from my process and not from the immediate results. So you can see here we're starting to try to shift away the investment from the expectation, and which is inherently random, what actually happens, and we more want to root it in what we can control, which is always understanding what we're doing and putting stock in the decision making. And if you want, emotionally invest in the decision making instead, because decision making is something that you can always control. And every time you make a bad decision, you can either flag that for later for demo review, or you can it's something that where you're like, okay, I probably should have done this. Now there's something here that is, as a quick side note, if you ever review your demos, you will very, very often find that what you thought was happening when you're playing the game is usually quite wrong. And that can go from the information that you had in the game, that how you perceive certain things, you may actually have been misinformed in some of the decisions that you made, or the bad plays that you thought you made may actually turn out to be completely fine, but you just focus on those and go, oh shit, I really fucked that up. And then the problem is, if you don't review it, you'll never know if that actually was the case. Because usually when you're playing the game, there is always going to be a level of emotional investment, and also your brain is going to be focused on, again, rationalizing things in a way where it's going to make sense to you right then to either help you play the game out or for some other means. So what you really need to do if you want to keep yourself honest is to review demos. And I know a lot of people don't like doing that, but the thing is, I believe that if you know how to watch demos, if you learn how to generate some analytical tools yourself, you're going to get a lot out of the demos. And once that starts to happen, you're going to be in a situation where it's very rewarding, because it takes a lot of pressure off of you in the game, because when you're in the game and you make a decision and you feel like maybe it was a mistake or not, you can flag that for later, either mentally or even note it down if you want, and check it and see whether or not that truly was a good or a bad decision. And in this way, when you make stuff happen, when stuff happens in the game, now you can just easily discard it. You don't have to think about it very much, because you're in a spot where you've essentially compartmentalized and said, okay, it's going in this box, deal with that over here later, and I don't have to worry about it now, because it's not about now, because this is just practice. I mean, you can be pissed off if you lose a tournament. You should be fucking pissed off. You should be, because that's where it all counts. And this is another interesting thing with anger, actually, because anger can be a performance enhancer for some people, and for other people, it can make their performance worse. And it completely depends on the person. And for me, I'm somebody where anger will generally make me play much worse, so I have to become a bit more zen in that respect. And in the way that I frame the game and my performance within the game, and how I am emotionally in the game. But the thing is, it's the same sort of thing works this way with pressure, because pressure, why people choke, for example, pressure is this thing that can really make people play better, because it makes you focus more, because the stakes are really high. And there's two ways to go there, right? The choking players are people that kind of start having this almost out of body experience, where they're no longer allowing their subconscious to really work and wear away all that practice, all the practice hours, and all these situations with all the mechanics. So you hit your motor coordination's on point. You're not involving your conscious brain in spots where it shouldn't be involved, which is in the mechanics and so on and so forth. And that's what choking tends to. That's what tends to happen in choking, is that your conscious brain and the anxiety that builds up, because because of the pressure, because either it gives you more focus or it gives you more anxiety. I guess it would be the ways that I would put it right now. And again, if you have the anxiety, generally it's going to mentally cause a really bad atmosphere, and then you're going to be very hyper aware of the wrong things. Because if pressure is performance enhancing, you're hyper aware but of the right things, and it doesn't fuck with you in that way. So again, that's probably a discussion for another time, but I just wanted to illustrate a little bit as to how the emotions can help or hinder you, but it really depends on you understanding how you are when you're playing. But for most people, I think they're experiencing anger in completely the wrong places, which is practice. So you have to learn to control your expectation. Try to as I made with points, as I can see them here, point 3 and 4, which is when you being angry because you can't understand what's going on, or being angry because something happens that's out of your control. those are random elements. So that's why they make you angry. They're random things that happen which fuck with your investment in the overall scope of what's going on. So you want to try to create a system that's going to shift your focus away from that. So demo review, analysis, that sort of thing. And if you also, another thing that really helps as well is if you're able to shift yourself into this mindset that's much more macro, where you can allow yourself to have bad performances as well. That's completely fine. Having bad performances is completely fine. But you have to understand how to deal with them. And some people can, with some people, bad performances turn into more bad performances because they let those performances tilt them. Because again, it doesn't match their expectations. You have to understand that it's not a big deal if you're not performing very well on one day. Because Counter-Strike, although it seems like everything's on one round or one map, it really isn't. It's about the long term. And if you can fix your decision making, and if you can be more calm and be better able to use emotions in a positive way when there are emotional situations, you're going to be a much better player, and you're going to rage less, you're going to learn more, and you're going to improve faster. And so I think that wraps it up more or less. Yeah, create the system and be aware. So I maybe have helped identify some of the ways I look at it, and yeah, for me the analysis thing very, very much helped. And just to give you another example here as well, I know a lot of people that get very angry and worked up when it comes to results. But the other thing you have to remember is that oh god, please don't do this to me, brain. Don't do this to me. The other thing you have to remember. Oh no, it's happening. I can't remember what I was going to say. It was going to be good. I think it's going to be good. I'll pause here, take a breath, see if I can remember. But this is a funny thing. If you ever try to recall something, the harder you try to recall it, it's the further into the depths of your mind it will run away. So it's like a game of cat and mouse in that sense when it comes to forgetting things. But I think I pretty much covered everything more or less. I don't think I'm going to add anything. So yeah, so try to make sure that you can limit your expectations, and it's never on one game, guys. It's going to be on. Try to look at the bigger picture here, and if you're playing matchmaking, and this is another thing, like try to realize the stakes. If you're trying to play matchmaking, how much does that rank really matter? Like rank doesn't mean anything in matchmaking. Everything should be about improving as a player, and that should be your reward system. If you're improving as a player, and you have to create a metric for that. You have to create your own system for you to understand if you are improving as a player, and it should revolve around your decision making. So there you go. If I remember what I was going to say, I'll put it in the comments or something, or annotations. I don't know, but I think I covered it pretty well. So sorry for the messy end of the video, but I hope you enjoyed this little talk. So hopefully I'll see you for more soonish, and well, that is me done for now.